Round 4 recap of the Sinquefield Cup 2022. We have some really big news today, a lot of drama in the Sinquefield Cup. I'm going to cover that first, so if you want to skip ahead to the games, there's timestamps down below in the description. But let's dive into this drama. So yesterday, Hans Niemann won his game against Magnus Carlsen, and we reviewed that game. Hans played a really good game, and if you look at the standings after 3 rounds, Hans was in the lead, 2.5 out of 3. Magnus was in clear second, 2 out of 3. All of that seemed normal. So this morning I was out on a walk, having a nice morning stroll. I come home, check the chess news for the day, and I see that Magnus declined to play his round today. Magnus forfeited his round. And my first thought was, well, he must be sick, or, maybe he's really upset about losing his game to Hans. But he was still +1 score. Like, it was still a good tournament for Magnus. Why would one loss cause you to withdraw? And Magnus has never withdrawn from an event just based on a loss. Now, every so often, maybe he's hard on himself, like in the match against Karyakin, and we'll skip a post-game interview. That's understandable, but he's never quit a tournament, especially like for any top-level player to leave a round-robin tournament. That's a big deal because it messes up all the other standings. So at first I wasn't sure if he just left this one round or not, but then I saw this tweet by Magnus, and he says, "I've withdrawn from the tournament. I've always enjoyed playing in the St. Louis Chess Club. Hope to be back in the future." And he links this kind of cryptic video of a soccer player essentially saying, "If I speak, I am in big trouble," meaning they might get fined or have some other repercussions. So they don't want to fully state what's going on here. Okay, so that's odd. And Magnus did not say that he was ill. So he's out of the tournament completely. So what that means for a round robin event, because they were before the halfway point, all of Magnus's previous games get nullified. They do still count for rating points, but in terms of the tournament standings, it's as if Magnus never even played the tournament. So Hans, for example, who beat Magnus, does not get credit for that win. So this is huge news. Now, I went on to Reddit, and Reddit loves chess drama. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the drama here, and I'm going to make a case for both. Did Hans cheat and did Hans not cheat? So essentially, that's what's happening here. Is a lot of players are talking about Hans potentially cheating or doing something that's just not fair play. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some of these video clips from Hikaru. My impression is essentially Hikaru has been stirring up the pot all day. And this started sometime in the morning because I went on Reddit Chess and I just saw all of these clips of videos from Hikaru. And at first Hikaru was trying to be very politically correct about it and just saying like, well, I don't want to talk too much about it and blah, blah, blah. But essentially, I think he kind of enjoyed the spotlight and just kept going on and on and on and digging more into the details. So let's kind of walk through these videos from Hikaru. They're short clips, and we'll talk through them.
The one thing already, which is 100% clear, which is that there was a period of time when Hans was not allowed to play tournaments for prize money on chess.com. That is the one bit that I said earlier in the stream. I'm saying it again. And I mean, I think you guys understand what that means. So that's what I said earlier. It's what I'm going to say again. That is like something straightforward. So that's just the one thing I will say.
So that's probably something you can go and verify. Hans maybe didn't play any for money titled tournaments on chess.com for a period of time. Hikaru is saying 6 months. So that was kind of the first thing he said this morning. And then here's a clip from a little bit later.
So yeah. Time to issue the arbiter rubber gloves. Yeah. I had no idea that Hans got caught. Well, like I said, it is what it is. That is not that is not up for debate. That is a known fact. So yeah. That's just a known fact. Anyway, thank you so much to Crazy Zur for the 15 months.
So that's kind of a big deal by Hikaru because I've never seen any statements from chess.com saying that Hans cheated. I've never seen a cheater flag on his chess.com profile. Hikaru is pretty much saying it's a known fact that Hans cheated. That's a big accusation. All right, let's go to the next video.
If you are super well prepared, I'll just say this as someone who's played a lot of games. If you're super prepared,
okay, so this just give you a little context. This is talking about Hans's interview after the win against Magnus. Hans said that he just happened to look at that exact line that he played against Magnus the morning of the event, and it was kind of a rare line. But Hans said like he's seen Magnus play some similar lines before, and he just kind of thought that might be one direction that Magnus would go. And keep in mind, these players go through a whole bunch of lines every single day in these events. Anything possible that the opponent could throw at them, they want to review all their notes and make sure that they're as ready as possible to play that day.
if you're super prepared and you looked at something that morning, you blitz out the first 20 moves. If you looked at it that morning, you just blitz out all the moves. No, you don't pretend. You don't use 12 minutes. You use like 3 or 4 minutes on one specific move. That's how it works. So I'm already on our chess for these comments. Of course I am. I mean, it's the topic of the day. I've probably said more than most people, so of course I'm going to end up on our chess. But yeah, I mean, they were saying something about my reaction on chess 24. Yeah, again, it's very clear why Magnus withdrew. I don't need to say it. I don't need to say it. Okay, it's just that simple. I don't need to say it, but we know why Magnus withdrew.
So there he goes. He's essentially just saying Magnus withdrew because Hans was cheating. And he's trying to claim here that in this game, Hans had used 12 minutes up until this point, and Magnus was blitzing out moves. He was trying to say that if Hans actually did just look at this, there's no reason he would have spent 12 minutes because that time is valuable later on. He's saying Hans should have played much faster, at most maybe a 3 or 4 minute thing, just trying to like make sure in his mind that he had all the moves correctly down. He was remembering everything correctly. But again, he's saying that Magnus quit because Hans cheated. This is from Hikaru, one of the most influential chess players, if not the most influential. So this is another one where he's talking about Hans being banned at least twice by chess.com. I'm going to skip over this one actually. And then this one is very interesting. Hikaru is saying that rumors have been swirling about Hans for quite a while. So there's Hans play online, which is one thing. But then Hans over the board, he's had very impressive run. He was just an IM like 2 years ago, rated, I believe, 2480. And now he's above 2700 after his win against Magnus, and just really skyrocketing in the FIDE rating. So let's see what he says.
Insights. I mean, as I said before, this is not a rumor. This is something that has been swirling for quite a while. I mean, I've even heard this. I've always assumed that it's not true, but this is something that I have heard. I've been hearing this on and off for quite a while. So, you know, I always just assume it's complete nonsense, obviously. But, you know, I mean, Magnus seems to believe it, so it's gaining a completely different. It's taking on a whole different, you know, whole different turn of events, whole different stance. Everything is wild. I'm glad it's a USA holiday, so I don't have to work and I can keep up.
This is going to be very interesting, guys, because if what Hikaru is saying is true, and there's sort of been this suspicion building up amongst all the top players, we're going to need to have a conclusion here. We're going to need to have some sort of statement from St. Louis Chess where they're going to need to say either, yes, we believe he's clean, we checked things out, certain suspicions were dug into, and Hans is allowed in all the major events still, or they're going to have to say that either that he cheated or that they're so suspicious of him cheating that maybe there has to be certain provisions for him to play in future events. But as of right now, I don't see Magnus Carlsen, for example, entering an event with Hans if the way things are standing here. So this is going to lead to a lot of drama in the chess world going forward. I'm very curious to see. I think in the next couple days, we're going to get a lot more information on this. Now, the next thing that came out was this older video from Jan Nepomniachtchi. And Jan was asked, it was either yesterday evening or this morning, what he thought of Hans's play so far in this event. And he actually said that it was more than impressive play. And a lot of people are reading into that more than impressive play means that maybe there was some sort of assistance being given to Hans where it wasn't just straight human level play. But someone pulled up this clip, and this was from 2 years ago, Jan Nepomniachtchi does some streaming on Twitch, and this is what he said about Hans. This is online play.
Play Hans, but I think Hans is sitting on his 3000. Like he should he should screenshot this and like pray for this elo. And how do you guys think in general if Hans is always playing himself, or he's using a bot? Because I believe, like, you know, few games, like especially when he's streaming or he's playing against someone known like me or Hikaru or someone else, he's commonly playing himself. But in general, when the stream is offline, I have a very strong feeling that sometimes he's like he's improving. He's improving.
So here Jan is saying that he believes that Hans uses a bot sometimes, which is a chess engine, and he doesn't really believe that Hans is always playing clean chess. Now here's the last clip from Hikaru. And what Hikaru did was he went back to look at the line that Hans played against Magnus, because Hans claimed that he had seen Magnus play some sort of similar line in the past. And he's talking about the fact that he wasn't able to verify Magnus playing this line before. So he's saying that maybe Hans had some other sort of information or maybe some sort of help during the game, because there's no way that Hans would have predicted Magnus was going into this line, like he said.
Open chess base. Okay, if Magnus never has played G3, if he's never played G3 before, then Hans is then I'm really sus, actually. I'm like more sus than I've been before. Yeah.
And sus means
let me
suspect
see.
or suspicious.
Let me check. Let me control N. Let me create a new board in chess base. D4 knight f6, C4 e6.
So he's looking up
knight
the
C3
game.
bishop b4. It was G3, right? Let me check. Online. Okay, let me search the position after G3. Let's see who's played. Has Magnus ever played this with white? Okay, let's see. Not Elo. Let's do it by white. Magnus's name does not show up. He has never played the G3 Nimzo. He's never played the G3 Nimzo ever. Wait a second. I mean, he's never played G3, and Hans is claiming that he prepped it up to move 20 before. Wait a second.
So this was a Nimzo Indian. Magnus played an early G3, and Hikaru is saying he verified in chess base, and Magnus had never played this type of line before. Now, one thing that I will say, when Alireza Firouzja was kind of making his big climb, he first was super strong online. And Danny Wrench even came out and said on one of the streams that some players had maybe accused Alireza of fair play violations or some sort of cheating online. Well, what ended up happening? Alireza got to 2,800 plus FIDE, and he's just a blitz monster in addition to a super strong classical player. He's top 5 in the world right now. He was number 2 in the world for a little stretch. So what we see oftentimes are young players can climb their ranks so quickly that it can look suspicious, right? If you see an older player all of a sudden shoot up 100 points, that's extremely suspicious at the high levels, because as I've seen in improvement data, the combination of already having a high rating and older age makes it really difficult to gain rating points. But if you're a young player who's improving quickly, even if you're 2,600, like a lot of times, those are the players that are getting up to that upper echelon, 2,750, 2,800 FIDE, right? So some players were suspicious of Firouzja. He turned out to just be a monster. Another thing, just to kind of give Hans a little bit of backing here, because I feel like everyone's just blaming Hans, jumping on the bandwagon online and saying Hans cheated. Okay, but this would ruin his chess career potentially if there's no proof, but everyone just claims that he's cheated and believes it. When Hans gives post-game interviews, he talks about chess positions in a different way than a lot of the other players. Now, you could say this is suspicious, but in the last few years, AlphaZero has changed the landscape of chess. And older players can start to incorporate some of these neural network engine ideas into their play. But younger players are brought up on neural networks, and this could include Hans. So when Hans talks about his chess, he talks about his games, he talks very big picture. He'll just say like, oh, there's no way this could be losing. This must be winning for white. Look at this full domination. He'll sacrifice the exchange and just say like black's king is completely open. Like we'll see in the Firouzja game. Like he'll say, there's no way I'm going to lose this position. It just wouldn't even make sense. And the other commentators will say, well, look at this eval. It's 0.00 or it's 0.5 or what do you think? Hans seems to think like a neural network engine. He doesn't really even seem to think in terms of eval. He's just talking about like board control, long-term plans. That's what AlphaZero did. That's what Leela does, one of the newer chess engines. It's a neural network. So I just want to put that out there. He's a young player. He could be the next Alireza Firouzja. He could be the next Magnus Carlsen. He could be using neural network engines, and that's why he plays with a different style. And maybe he has a new understanding that some of these top players don't even get yet. So I don't want to draw any conclusions here on this channel. I just want to give you guys the full recap of why there's suspicions, what that means for the tournament, but also kind of talk about the other side of things and say, let's not just jump to conclusions here on Hans. He's innocent until proven guilty. These are really serious allegations to say that he's cheating in an over-the-board event, and we need more details, and that'll be coming soon. So one thing that they've done at St. Louis Chess Club is they've delayed the relay of the games by 15 minutes. That's a security measure. So if someone were, let's say, watching the game with engine evals running and somehow able to feed that back to the players, that will kind of help mitigate that risk because there's that 15-minute delay. Players aren't going to wait for 15 minutes every move to get a little piece of information. Another thing that they're doing is they have stricter security measures for the players themselves, meaning they're wanding the players with a metal detector wand first, and then they have like a radio signal device where they essentially wand the players a second time. They're being very strict to make sure there's nothing on the players' bodies. They're doing the delay. And I'm assuming they have other measures in place too, additional measures, like maybe the spectators are under tighter control, things like that. All right. So, sorry, that was 17 minutes. Let's now just jump into the games and talk a little bit of chess here for today. So the first game, obviously, was Magnus Carlsen, did not show up against Schock. So Mamedyarov gets the win by forfeit, technically, but this won't affect rating points because they didn't play a game, and it won't affect the standings because now, as we know, all of Magnus's games have been nullified. So essentially, this was a non-result. All right, next we have Jan Nepomniachtchi against Wesley So. This was the first game to finish. It was a super fast game. Jan is one of the players that's suspicious of Hans. I haven't heard any statements from Wesley on this, but they start out with a Queen's Gambit declined. Now we see G3. This is a Catalan. And what Jan was saying in his post-game interview was that he's used this line before, and he's actually played it from the reverse side too. So he said that Wesley was very well prepared for this and played all the best moves. So a6, knight c3, takes the rook's trade, this pawn drops, and at this point we are equal on material, but if you look at this bishop on a8, it counters the Catalan bishop on g2. So black is sort of neutralizing white's play here, and then this is a very common move. Bishop d5 secures the pawn on c4. Black is just super solid. The engine does say 0.5, but I think Wesley was really ready for this line and kind of had all the ideas down. So after rook to d1, he plays knight c6, brings the knight back into the game. Queen b8, queen b6, and now he's getting a little bit of counterplay here and getting ready to bring the rook in, applying pressure to white's weakest pawn, the pawn on b2. And it's pretty amazing, like these doubled pawns are not a weakness for black at the moment. This pawn is very well secured. This bishop is actually just stuck playing passive, and it's behind white's pawn chain. So black has the doubled isolated pawns on the c-file, but white is also a little bit cramped. So these factors balance out, and essentially the position is equal here. He takes, pawn takes. Now we do see the bishop pair for white, but this is a bad bishop on c1. and black has fixed his pawn structure. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Knight e5 played, double attacking this knight, and there's this move queen a7 attacking the queen. Queen takes c6 played, rook b6, and the issue now is this queen doesn't have any squares. Every square is covered by black. So b3 is played, and if rook takes c6, knight takes c6, this is a crazy engine prep line that both of these players knew, according to Jan. This queen moves somewhere, knight takes e7 check, king f8, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, b takes c4, the knight is pinned. Somehow this all comes out to be equal, or maybe a very slight advantage for white with practical play. The players knew all this. b3 is played and then bishop f8, avoiding that nonsense. Queen a4, rook a6, and we see a repetition. So this is one where the players both just knew the opening really well. I think Jan was kind of saying like maybe he should have played something different because the fact that he had already played this before made it too easy to prep for Wesley. And look at these accuracy scores, 99 to 99. All right, the next game to finish is game number 3. Levan Aronian against Lanier Dominguez Perez. We see a Sicilian, and there's this interesting idea that Aronian has played before where he just goes bishop c4. And he said in his post-game interview he's looking for new ways to play against the Sicilian instead of the traditional just d4 takes open Sicilian. So this could be an interesting game, some new ideas. Knight f6, attacking the pawn. See a fianchetto by black, so it's kind of like a Sicilian dragon, except the c pawn did not trade for the d pawn. h3 prevents bishop to g4. a3 gets this bishop ready to tuck back if, for example, knight a5 is played. It tucks back anyways. Rook b1, b4. Now we get this kind of interesting structure. Couple moves right here. White kind of wants to play c4, and Levan talked about this after the game. If he plays an immediate c4, completely shuts down this bishop, and the position is so closed that it's essentially impossible for white to play for a win. And best case scenario is move this bishop out of the way and try to swap all the rooks on the A file. Get everything all traded off, and it's going to be a draw. So here he plays c3, just a little bit more flexible, keeping that bishop open on the diagonal. Knight e5, and now knight takes, pawn takes. So this gives white an advantage with the pawn structure. Black has double pawns. That means long term, maybe white could play d4. Maybe white could play f4. Black is a little bit more stuck here in trying to figure out how to push the pawns ahead. c2, knight e8, knight f1. Both players are rerouting the knights to better squares. It looks like Levan wants the knight over here. And now knight takes b5 is an option. And the reason Levan allowed this is because it's a way to play dynamically. You can play here, attack the knight, and then you can snag this pawn on b6, and after knight takes, white has a lot of activity, right? This pawn is weak, this rook is active, bishop's coming to e3, attacking this, the knight's on a nice outpost on c4. This is an advantage for white. It's a small advantage, but that's not what black wants to play into. So instead he plays rook to a5, with the rook, and that kind of forces Levan's hand. You either need to play knight c4, allowing rook takes b5, or pawn c4. So he plays pawn c4, locks it up, and at this point Levan said he was happy with the draw because he didn't feel he could press here, and the other option is just swap all the rooks on the a file like we talked about. Players repeat. Another high-level game, 96 accuracy by both, and they agreed to a draw. All right, here we go. Hans Niemann, round number 4. How is he going to be affected by Magnus withdrawing? Hans has essentially outplayed 3 opponents in a row, and this is Alireza Firouzja with the white pieces. Alireza has played very aggressively in some of his games. Maybe Hans could get the win here, which would be an incredible start to the tournament. We see a kind of Joko piano turning into a 2 knights game. Yep, now it's Joko piano territory. Rook e1, a4. So we're not following many games here, but this is kind of a standard setup. There's different move orders for both sides. but I've seen a lot of these positions before at high-level chess. It's just that very small advantage for white, right around 0.3 according to Stockfish. Knight to a3 played, d4. So white's getting this small space advantage. Knight g6, bishop f1. That's a grandmaster move. You might wonder, why put the bishop back on the starting squares? Oftentimes the bishop here is safer. It can come back out later. And this knight wants to head to c4. Attacking pawn, bishop, pawn, pawn. So it's a great square for the knight. c6, knight c4. Bishop retreats. So Alireza just made room for that bishop. D takes, knight takes. This was an interesting decision. If d takes back, this is a symmetric pawn structure where white just has a very annoying small pull, right? This pawn is under attack by both knights, defended by bishop and knight. White is the only one that can probably realistically win this position, and black may get ground down in a really long, uncomfortable endgame, just fighting for the draw. So instead, Alireza takes with the knight. Bishop f4 is played. Knight could take f5 here and kind of go for that same structure. But what I like about this move, bishop f4, is Hans is playing very aggressively. And think back to what we talked about the neural networks. See what happens coming up. Knight takes, queen takes, d5, rook a to d1 by Hans. Both players have close to an hour, and we're at move 17. That means they have 23 more moves to get their bonus 30 minutes, and they still get a 30-second per move increment. So plenty of time. Bishop e6, e5, dislodging the knight. This is an alpha 0 type maneuver playing e5, because when the knight moves away from f6, that leaves the defense of the black king. So long term, the black king is just slightly more vulnerable after the knight goes to d7. Queen g3, eyeing bishop takes h6. The king moves, and this is a mistake by Alireza. Look at this line though. This is the best move, d takes c4. Bishop takes h6, g6, and this, according to the engine, it's going up, up, up for white slowly. It's around 0. It started out saying minus 0.8. This is 100% an alpha 0 style attack. And in the post-game interview, they talked about this line. And the way Hans described it, he just said white should be winning this all day long. He couldn't tell you any concrete lines, which is kind of an alpha 0 thing, right? It's just a position where black is completely cramped and they cannot get the queenside pieces over to the king side very quickly. And he just felt that white should never lose this and white has an advantage. So really interesting to hear him say that. This definitely looks like an alpha 0 style attack. King h8 played, knight to d6. So now the knight does have to move, sinks into d6, knight c5. Now rook to d4 by Hans. This rook is ready to come over here. And the interesting thing coming up is Hans doesn't seem to care about the material in this position. He's definitely okay giving up points on the scoreboard, the material scoreboard, if he gets dynamic play and long-term pressure against black's king. So bishop takes, he takes, knight e4. Annoying, kind of attacking the queen. And look at this move by Hans. Rook takes e4. That's not even the top engine move. The engine says queen to h2 should be the best. What I like about this move is it's long term. You know you're giving up one point, excuse me. So it's a rook for bishop and pawn. Well, white has the bishop pair, and all of these pieces are going to attack the black king. Bishop d3, pointing over here. This bishop points here. The rook's ready to come over. Queen's already on the g file. Bishop f5. And rook e3 was played here, but there is a crazy line. I'm a little surprised Hans didn't play it based on how aggressively he's played and his kind of lack of materialistic play. Bishop to e5, attacking the queen. And after queen g6, there's rook to g4. So queen to g6 here is a small mistake, but it's the natural move. Rook to g4 could be played. And if bishop takes here, the queen drops. And if bishop takes here, the queen drops this way. And queen h5, the g7 pawn drops. Queen to g5 should be played in this position, but there's still rook to g4. And after queen c1, king h2, bishop takes, queen takes. I believe they talked about this line in the broadcast too. and Hans felt that this was winning for white. Engine's saying 0.00, but it's very similar. It's +3 in terms of material for Alireza. But these rooks are helpless, and white has all of the play in the position with a passed pawn. This is sort of next level chess, I think. This is neural network style chess, long-term attacks, and we haven't seen humans fully implement this style of play yet. This could be something that other players learn from. If it comes out that there was no suspicious play, we could definitely be learning from what Hans is doing here in these games. Rook to e3 played. Bishop takes, rook takes. So now white loses the bishop pair and loses a bit of that play against the king. Alireza is still up 1 point on the material. Queen d2, rook d8, bishop back. So at this point, Alireza gives up the pawn, but the idea is, wins a4. The idea is the rooks are starting to get active. So even though white has this monster passed pawn, black is getting a little bit of play, and maybe this king side's exposed for white. Bishop d4, putting that back onto an active diagonal. It's threatening queen takes h6 because this pawn is pinned. Rook guards it. Now bishop to b6 and bishop to c7. What Hans has done here is he's set up this kind of stronghold on d6. He's not allowing Alireza to take or even sacrifice on d6, knowing that long term, maybe he can get that pawn to push, cause some problems for black. Queen c6, rook e3, takes. Now there is the opportunity to sacrifice. And after this, we get essentially an equal game, queen each, 5 pawns each, no play for either side. And the players very quickly go for a repetition. Draw agreed. So again, Hans outplayed his opponent. That's 4 games in a row. He could have potentially won against Aronian, and he could have potentially won against Firouzja. Those are the 2 games that Hans drew. So let me know what you think in the comments about Hans's play. I'm very curious. Next up, we have this game between Fabiano Caruana and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. I'm going to refresh it. They're still going, which is just insane. We are 90 moves deep. So if we look at the table base, this is a loss for black. But if we look at the chart, it has gone back and forth between win and draw for a long time. So this came out of a Sicilian, queenside castle by white. I'll just start us at move 1. Sicilian, Najdorf variation, queenside castle by white, both sides pawn storming. And we're going to reach an endgame where Fabiano is up 1 pawn in a queen and pawn endgame. So there's a little bit of shuffling here. We see now 2 pawns on the queen side to 1, and there's an extra d6 pawn by black. And after all of the dust settles, queen and rook each, extra pawn for Fabiano, and there goes the rooks. So they reach this position at move 38. 2 minutes for Fabiano, 7 for MVL. And Fabiano has missed some wins. MVL has missed some draws. And the current position right here with the table base on is a win for white. If he finds one of 3 moves, king b6, king c6, queen d4. These players are down to 7 minutes, 2 minutes. Sorry, those are the current times, not the times from previous because they're still playing. But essentially, Fabiano has to find very accurate moves, and he hasn't found them yet. So I'll let you know tomorrow how this game turns out, or you can check the results online. But we don't know the current updated results because this has not even been updated with the Magnus news. So I'm going to have to give you that tomorrow as well. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments of this whole drama. Do you think there was any suspicious play by Hans? Do you feel like these allegations are unfounded? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you for tomorrow's recap.